Yes.
So yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
we can see.
Yes.
Yeah.
wonderful.
Right,
yeah,
I want to start now and saying hello.
Oh yeah, sure. So sorry, I thought you'd started.
No. Hello, welcome to the latest Content Club Pep Talk, and these things happen with the help of Content Design London, and thank you to them. Right, over to you, Laura. You can introduce yourself and you can tell us what you're going to talk to us today about.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me on. I'm a content designer and accessibility specialist, and I'm here to talk about how we can improve our services for people with maths anxiety, low numeracy, and dyscalculia. This talk involves a lot of numbers, which ironically I really struggle with. So if I'm making mistakes with my number reading, please be patient. I'm still learning. And as a side note, you may have spotted the Dracula emoji. There is one, this Dracula emoji on screen. And back in the old days of Twitter, someone said that they kind of use the word Dracula to think about dyscalculia. And I thought that was kind of cool and kind of cute. So I've kept that in there as a kind of nod to the old Twitter ways. Okay, let's see. So according to a Skills for Life survey done in 2011, it showed that almost half, or about half of adults in the UK have low numeracy. And if you have experienced low numeracy or maths anxiety or dyscalculia, you may have felt that living with the effects of this, not understanding numbers and the impact that has on everyday life. Like, for example, managing money, arranging appointments, doing calculations, and even telling the time. 1 second, sorry, I'm just I'll make this out. And according to National Numeracy in 2023, a third of working age adults in the UK say that doing maths makes them feel anxious. Nearly half of the UK's working age population has low numeracy, and around 6 million people in the UK are expected to be dyscalculic. Maths anxiety is really defined as a feeling, I guess, when doing maths problems or when being confronted with numbers. So some people report like feeling sweaty or feeling sick, and some people report to actually being physically sick as well. Low numeracy is defined as people who give incorrect or no answer to like basic maths questions. Now, lots of people can have low numeracy for many reasons, and it's really important to say that experiencing maths anxiety or living with low numeracy is not a measurement of intelligence. It's quite important to say that. Next, I just want to drill down a little bit more into what dyscalculia is, because it tends to be kind of lesser recognized between the three. So dyscalculia is defined as a specific and persistent difficulty in understanding numbers. Everyone's experience is different, but usually dyscalculics have a poor sense of number estimation, and telling the time. So the time is something that I really struggle with. They tend to have low mental arithmetic skills, have high levels of maths anxiety, and difficulties with working memory, which you probably wouldn't associate with dyscalculia, but there's definitely things like remembering items on a shopping list and phone numbers and game scores is quite hard. Counting is quite hard. Remembering sequences of numbers, for example, is hard as well. Many adults are unaware that they have dyscalculia, and they might sort of know themselves that they struggle with numbers, and it's kind of nearly as common as dyslexia, and there's a link between dyscalculia, dyslexia, and dyspraxia. And the I can't remember the term, but if you are dyslexic, you're likely to have dyscalculia as well. I'm actually dyslexic, dyscalculic, and dyspraxic, and those words are terribly hard to say and spell as well. If you do use numbers in your service, and if they're not accessible, you could be excluding a whole host of people. So not just people who struggle with numbers, it could be others as well. There's a rise of children becoming more responsible for their family finances. They may have parents with low numeracy skills, for example. They may have moved to the UK and maybe translating information for their parents. People with university degrees may struggle to tell a time or to read their university timetables because of dyscalculia. And people living with a chronic illness or recovering from treatment report feeling stressed about managing money, especially if they have to leave their job because for whatever reason they need to time off work. And we now know from the trauma-informed design practice that people experiencing grief or living with anxiety are more likely to misinterpret number information, especially again with dealing with finances. So it's very important that we consider accessible numbers in our service. Dyscalculia is not something you can turn on and off. It's not always consistent. Some days, personally speaking, I have good days. Some days I have terrible days. My experience is very personal to me. And I used to get into a sort of like a dark hole of negativity, both feeling like I was stupid, feeling ashamed, because of some of the things that I struggle with. And, you know, it's been eroding my confidence for a long time. And similar people who are in the same situations tell me the same thing. These things tend to sort of ramp up when I'm triggered or if I'm feeling particularly anxious or stressed. So no day is the same. It's not, everyone's experience is not the same as well. So you can't really put people in certain buckets. But I think it's nice to share my experience with you today, but also be positive that we can really help people like me in the services that we provide and produce. There are three main ways that I have kind of struggled with my dyscalculia, but also these themes actually run quite common in other people's experience. Understanding numbers relates to all three, and it's not a full list, but because this is a kind of short talk today, I can only really cover the three. We'll start with managing money first of all. So a 2021 Plain Numbers report, and if you don't know, Plain Numbers is an organisation that works with big corporations to help to make financial information legible or easy to understand. They did a report in 2021, and the report suggests that people make choices about money on the mistaken belief that they understand the information given to them. So the way they measured this was they showed people I think it was a utility bill, and then they asked people questions about the utility bill, and they found that people couldn't answer the questions after saying that they understood the information. So the information was shown to them. They said they understood the information. When asked questions, they couldn't answer it. The report also found that nearly half feel overwhelmed and stressed when dealing with money, and 1 in 4 admit needing help understanding the options they have taken out. So in this scenario, someone takes out a loan or whatever it is, that they get money in some way, but they don't understand the options that are available to them. So people who need help with numbers often do these things. They may overpay or underpay for things, send the wrong amount of money to somebody, or get into debt easier. There's something deeply personal and distressing about feeling that your finances are out of control. I personally have probably lost thousands by like overpaying, not spotting a sort of mistake on a receipt, sending the wrong amount of money. I was meant to send 20 quid to someone. I sent £2,000. Luckily they sent it back to me, but if they hadn't noticed or they were perhaps not a nice person, I wouldn't have got that money back. And unfortunately, I've had some really terrible experiences with banks. I started my first job when I was 16, and my mum and we trudged down to the local bank, and it was kind of in person. and I signed up to a bank account. I used to lose my PIN or forget my PIN so often that I'd have to ring, and this happened several times. Some of the things that I used to do, so I got my PIN wrong. I would often leave my card in the cash machine and walk away, or my card would get swallowed. So basically, you had to go to a cash machine. There was no other way. And then it got so bad that they denied me an account. They accused me of being a fraud. I was 16. They removed my account from me, and I really had no way of accessing that money. So there's definitely some trauma wrapped up in managing money for me these days. Now, these days, services like bank services have got a lot better, but we still seeing people mismanage money or not feel confident in money. So there's improvements to be made. So for the last year or so, I've been gathering some examples of how we might display numbers clearly. So let's have a look at them. I'm not saying that these are the best in the world. I'm not saying that they may be useful, but it's just nice to look at some ways that we can perhaps help people like me. Has that changed? It has, yeah. So how you display money is super important. If you can, please remove the decimals. So £10 can easily look like £1,000 depending on how it's displayed. So this is an error that I make constantly, is counting the extra zeros. So if you can, if it's a straightforward round number, round it up, get rid of the decimals. Obviously, when we're talking about money, we have pounds and pence. So if it's an exact amount, obviously you have to show that. And when talking about pence, I think writing the word pence, so 5 pence instead of 0.05, perhaps is a little bit easier to understand. I could easily look at this and actually get the numbers the wrong way around and think it's £500. The mind works in mysterious ways. So let's have a look at an example from a utility company. So what I'm showing you here is 2 images. The first, which is on the left, shows how a water bill is calculated. It says that the charge for fresh water by square meter, I think that's right, is £1.3818. And I'm thinking, this is not a real number. Now, I know that £1.3818 is not a real number. So there's not a lot I can really do with that information. The image on the right, though, shows the same water bill, but instead tells the user how much money is charged in pounds and pence. So it's kind of saying, charge for water use is £93.84. So it's the same information, but what we're doing is we're actually saying this is how much you're paying for it, instead of giving me numbers that I don't fully understand. Utility bills come up a lot in this talk because they seem to be so bad. But here's another energy bill. Again, the picture on the left shows an energy bill in a traditional, what you would consider a table format, with the writing on the left and the money on the right. We know that people who need help with numbers get anxious about seeing tables. It kind of denotes some sort of maths. I guess if you have maths anxiety, you might be thinking, oh, I need to do some calculations here or something. So conversely, the picture on the right hand side is the same information, but it's kind of written out in plain English using short paragraphs, and it flows kind of like a story. And this is something that we've kind of called what we're calling a story format. So it's taking the kind of cold hard facts and then presenting them in a kind of more flowy story type way. Now, obviously, we don't want to diminish the experience for people who have no number problems. I have friends who work in data viz and in business analysts and things who prefer and find it easier to look at numbers. So what I've been kind of toying with is the idea of having a toggle on this type of information. I mean, this is I think this is an email, so for printed it might be different, but if you've got information online, perhaps there's a way that we can toggle between the numbers and the sort of story, so that people can truly understand what's going on. Next one, which is quite interesting, I want to talk about is mirroring information. So this is about checking out or paying for things online. So when we pay for something online, I don't know about you, but I will always get my card out and I would mirror what's on my card. So if you've got your card out in front of you, you would likely see that the card number is the first thing that you see, or the thing at the top. But actually, form fields usually are in the wrong order, so it might ask for your name first. Now, it's really important that we can help users if they're mirroring something. So I'm extra paranoid when it comes to paying for things, that I will literally get my card and put it right in front of the screen. So if I'm on my phone, I kind of hold it like this, and I will look at every single digit and spend about 3 seconds on each to make sure I have the right numbers in there. And it just gets confusing if that's not the same order that I'm seeing on my card. If that makes sense. I've got a funny story to share as well about this, which was when I worked at university. I worked in a bar, and it was going on 10, 15 years now, and we used a handheld chip and pin device to get people to pay. And it was kind of like the old school chip and pin, so they were really bulky. It kind of wasn't like one of the fancy ones you get nowadays. And the way that they'd laid out the information was that the gratuity field, so when you leave a tip, was where the pin field should be. And so when you would pass the machine to the customer, and they would type in, okay, I want to give you like 10 quid gratuity, or I want to tip you £10. But what we were seeing was people were putting their PIN number in the gratuity field and then doing it again. So they would put the PIN in the gratuity, and you'd be like, oh, why hasn't this worked? And then they would put the actual PIN number in the PIN field. And and sometimes on a busy shift you don't usually catch it. So fortunately, most of the time you would tell the customer, oh, by the way, it's the gratuity first and then the PIN. But on a busy Friday shift, it was hard to catch. So you can imagine the calls on a Saturday morning from people freaking out about why they'd spent God knows how much at a bar. So these are the kinds of mistakes that people are still making. And obviously, if the information's in the wrong order, there's a chance that they could put their PIN number or their important information in the form field that would be shown to everybody. So this is quite a simple tip. Check that if you're asking people to pay, that they've got the form fields match the credit and debit cards that we use. Next one is probably the bane of my life, which is reference numbers. Now, when I was younger, I used to have this notepad. I guess it was like an A3 size. Is that A4? The smaller than A4 sized, and it was full of reference numbers. And because I forget numbers often and I struggle to interpret them, I will be really meticulous about writing them down. And so I had this big book of numbers, didn't understand what the real purpose was or when were they needed. So if you are using reference numbers in your service, please tell the user why they exist and when they are needed. There are 2 examples on screen. The first one at the top is a reference number which is about, I think, 30 digits long. And it's a mixture of numbers, dashes, and letters. Now, this is a confirmation I received for booking a bowling alley, which is really bizarre. There was no information around why you would need this reference number, and you would probably have quite a hard time trying to tell someone this reference number. And I just laughed my head off when I saw it. I was like, what does this even mean? The example below is something that I wrote when I was working on a service in government, and it's a standard government success page with a green banner which says, application complete, here's your reference number. The difference is, though, I tell the user what happens next, when the reference number is needed, if you should keep it, when you'd be asked for it is a good one as well. Like, you'll be asked for this reference number when you call us, when you change or cancel your application, or if you ask for an update. So again, something relatively simple you can do if you're using reference numbers in your service. Now, I'm hoping that you're all doing some kind of research, and if you are, that's great. Like I said at the beginning, though, some people know they struggle with numbers but wouldn't really identify that they have dyscalculia or maths anxiety. They might not have the right vocabulary to say. So if you're trying to research with people who are dyscalculic, for example, you might find that they're few and far between. But what you can do is you can use some opening discussion questions. Now, if you go onto a search engine and you type in maths anxiety opening discussion questions, you will likely find the first result is by Professor Tom Hunt. Professor Tom Hunt does a lot of work around maths anxiety, and he has a list of about 35 questions that you can ask during an interview or research session. And the questions involve, for example, how anxious would you feel if someone watched you add up a pile of change? And there's like a scoring framework, and you can score on that, or the person can score using the framework, and you could use that to gauge how confident your participants are around numbers, which I thought was an interesting one to include, because I know that a lot of people do struggle to recruit people who struggle with numbers in their research. Okay, are we all still with me? I can't see you. I hope this is going well. Next is understanding health information, and I've got a note on my slide to have a sip of water. So thank you, me from the future. Half of UK adults don't understand health information. This is according to the NHS, and this was a survey done in 2016. So I imagine that's probably changed for the worst, sadly. There's a great article written by Jonathan Berry, and he talks about how one person who I don't know if he knew the person, or some way he found a person who didn't realize there was a connection between their type 2 diabetes and what they ate. And there was another person who received a positive cancer diagnosis but couldn't understand why they weren't improving. So health information is or health literacy, I think is what they call it, is a whole different talk. But from the number perspective, I just wanted to include this stat in here as well, because we deal with things like probability a lot and recovery rates and things like that. So there's still lots of numbers used in healthcare. Like, for example, in the medical space alone, we can kind of foresee the ways people might struggle to understand, like, for example, the effectiveness of a drug they're about to take and how likely they are to experience a side effect, and the probability of recovering or not. And unfortunately, people with maths anxiety are not confident assessing the risk of medical treatment. So we're actually talking quite serious stuff now. This is people's access to health information, which is the most important thing really in life, isn't it? And unfortunately, there are some ways that people who need help with numbers may struggle with this type of content. So people who need help with numbers might misread appointment times and dates, get anxious about being late for appointments, misunderstand medical risks, or even get medicine dosages wrong. Just before we started this talk, we were having a discussion about how, if you've got a medical appointment, say at like 4 p.m, you kind of lose the day. I mean, I don't know about you, but I do. So I'll be, just thinking about that appointment, thinking, am I going to be late for this? Just feeling generally anxious. And of course, because I have time blindness, which means I can't read time in a linear way, I'll often make sure that I'm there a half an hour to an hour earlier than I needed to be. I will repeatedly look at traffic information to see if there's like a road closure or something that might prevent me from getting there on time. And And these days, I'm kind of extra careful about medicine labels. Now, I don't know if you've had a medicine packet lately, but you know, when you get them from the pharmacy and they have that like white label, sometimes it's really hard to see and understand the information. And unfortunately, when I was younger, I did end up taking the wrong dose of medicine. Because I misread the numbers on the packet. Now, thankfully, touch wood, it wasn't a serious event, but I remember lots of people around me were quite panicked. So these days I am extra careful, and I will, if I'm talking to a pharmacist or a doctor, I will go through with them, oh, this means I take 3 tablets twice a day. Like, I will be very explicit in asking, is this the right amount of medicine that I need to consume? The NHS says that people miss medical appointments because information is inaccessible or wrong. It's hard to cancel or rearrange appointments, and there's a lack of reminders, particularly for appointments booked years ago. I don't know about you, but I've definitely booked appointments from years ago, and I would really appreciate a reminder as well. And similarly, people with ADHD who also experience time blindness rely on reminders and things like that. So if you're working in the medical space and your service is a part of your service is about people booking appointments, consider reminders. I think that would be really helpful. But I have a question for you. Now, bear with me because it's quite a tricky question to read out. So, okay, so it takes 11 days to count to 1 million at a rate of 1 number per second. So 11 days to count to 1 million. And if you fancy having a go, if you want to pop in the chat, the answer to the question is, how long does it take to count to 1 billion? So if it takes 11 days to count to 1 million, how long does it take to count to 1 billion? Now, if you've got any idea, please pop it in the chat. And I'm hoping Mia or Tom might be able to read out some of the suggestions. If anyone fancies to go.
We've got 30 years, 11,000. I think I know the answer to this. 30 years, 11,000 days. And they're the 2 answers. I would say 31 years.
Yeah, bang on. It's actually 31 years. Yeah, you must have seen that one before. Oh, your maths is really good.
One of those random facts you saw in a cracker or something.
Yeah, that's right. So it takes 31 years to count to 1 billion at the rate of 1 number per second. Now, the question's quite a silly one, but measuring the scale of numbers like this becomes tricky with large numbers because they're hard to comprehend. Now, we don't often use billions in our content, although some services will do, but we do use a lot of numbers. Even though we hear numbers like 1 billion every day, if you're somebody like me who struggles to understand numbers, then you really don't have that sense of proportion. Like, what actually is billion? Now, I think probably a lot of people feel that way, but when we get talking about the scale of things, like for example COVID, COVID impacted a lot of people, and I remember listening to those COVID briefings every day and not really understanding clearly what was going on in terms of this scale. So I was constantly saying to my boyfriend Dave, I was like, oh, this, what does it really mean? And I kind of had this like sense that I just didn't understand. And it made me feel quite vulnerable because I was getting told that it was lots of people, but I just couldn't understand the relationship to that, like how big that was. And so what tends to happen is that we rely on services to interpret data for us. And like I said, sometimes the scale of numbers can become quite frightening. And it creates like a power imbalance between those who can understand what's happening and those that can't. And most of the time, governments, businesses, we're quite good at interpreting data, but I think we can get a lot better. So let's have a look at some ways. Another tip from me is to have a look at the typeface and font that you're using. So I don't know if you're aware, but sometimes people's experience, or they report looking at numbers and they become like distorted in some way. So numbers might be fuzzy, backward, they might appear in the wrong order. And this is kind of something that's reported with people with dyslexia as well. So they're looking at a page of text, but for some reason it's not quite looking pristine, and they might, the numbers might be all over the place. So if you're using a particularly interesting font, just be aware that sometimes people, the view is distorted. So make sure there's a lot of space around your content. And something that I really struggle with is telling the difference between numbers and letters. And sometimes if you have a typeface or font where the letters and the numbers look the same, for example, like the number 7 and the letter L kind of just look the same to me, even though they're kind of the opposite of each other. I'm also known for talking about this slashed zero idea. So the slashed zero is a zero, the number 0 with a sort of line through it, a diagonal line. The reason why I really like this is because the letter O and the number 0 become hard to sort of like distinguish. And it doesn't help that they're really close together on a keyboard neither. So when we're talking about things like reference numbers or passwords and things like that, it would help to distinguish the letters from the numbers, and you can do that by using a /0, which is kind of the 0 with a line through it. Now, I would say test this, because some people report that the /0 looks like a number 8, which it kind of does. So if you're changing up your font or your like typeface or anything, just have it tested, do some user research on it. Again, going back to the medicine bottle thing, like not being able to sort of read medicine dosages, I think the reason why I made an error was just because of I remember it wasn't like the print of the label wasn't clear, and so I think I misread like the 3 for a 2, for example. So yeah, just be extra cautious and careful with the fonts, especially around numbers. Yeah, so we use percentages a lot, particularly in healthcare, which is what this section is about, and to communicate risk and probability. Now, risk and probability is a hard concept to convey anyway. People will struggle to understand risk when affected by strong emotions like fear, uncertainty, and maybe they're going through treatment themselves and they're tired. So an interesting way of talking about this, or the way, is actually called expected frequency. So Cancer Research UK were asked to review sort of like some evidence of pros and cons of treatment, and what they came up with was this idea of expected frequency to communicate probability. So instead of saying the probability of recovering is 79%, what they actually did was they rephrased the sentence to, out of 75 cases, we would expect 59 to recover. Now, I think they did some testing on this and it showed a slight improvement. I just thought that would be quite interesting to share with you. And interestingly as well, the NHS service manual says it's better to sort of say 1 in 2 or half rather than 50%. Now, I think the idea is that any numbers that you can remove is a good thing to do. So in this case, if you're talking about 50%, I think the readability of saying half is better than 50%, because sometimes, honestly, my mind goes to places and I'm like, I don't actually know what 50% means. Even though it's probably the easiest percentage of them all to understand, I still don't have that concept of 50% is half of 100. And I'm like, 50% of what? So just some interesting information around talking about and displaying numbers in regards to sort of probability. The last part of this talk then is about work, and I think this is probably my favorite topics to talk about. But before I get going, I want to ask you another question, which is how many windows are there in London? And if Tom and Mia could have a look at the chat, that would be great. So how many windows are there in London? Have you got any guesses?
No guesses yet.
That's fine. Don't worry about it. I actually don't know the answer.
Riddle, doesn't it?
Say again?
I said it sounds like a riddle.
Yeah, it
Somebody
definitely
said
it is.
980,000, 1 million.
I actually don't. It's a trick question. I don't know the answer. If you want to, please Google and let me know. But I was asked this question once in a job interview for a content role. They wanted to test my strategic thinking skills, and I remember this so clearly. It was like the fourth question. It was so early. It was an hour's interview. I thought, I'm dressed the part. I feel good, and then they just boom landed this question. I was like, what now? Like, I had no idea, and I really struggled because my mind just went, I just had no idea. There is no way, and I don't think anyone could have really clearly answered this question unless you knew the answer, or unless you were very, very mathematical minded or strategical minded, which I'm not. And I just remember I started to go bright red like a beetroot, and I just felt sick, and I just properly bombed. I was, I have no idea. I can't answer the question. And I remember after the interview, the recruiter giving me feedback like I wasn't strategic enough, or I wasn't thinking about, I think like sellability, or they worded it really weird. And I just thought, wow, this is like, it's so intense. I had no idea this job was this question was coming. I wasn't expecting it for a content role. So yeah, just another personal story of just how bizarre these things get. And I had a really horrible experience as a result. And I'm not alone in this. In fact, 1 in 5 people say they will avoid applying for jobs because the job itself or the interview process involves math in some way. And adults with low numeracy often have fewer employment opportunities, and a lack of number confidence is really an obstacle that stops people from really achieving their full potential. And I think that's really sad. I really hope that we can change this. And unfortunately, sometimes it's worse. As someone told me after a talk like this one, they said, I lost my job because of not being able to understand numbers and was homeless for a while as a teenager as a result. People who need help with numbers might be late or too early if they are paranoid about being late. Me. They may miss meetings, need longer to work on number-related tasks. And sadly, it's my experience that I've been overlooked, discouraged, and been disabled by colleagues and other people I know from applying for jobs. And they may say to me things like, oh, no, but you're not really good with numbers. And, oh, but you're really slow to do this thing. Are you sure you want that job? We need to not do that. We need to be the opposite of that. We need to be that kind and thoughtful instead. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but being dyscalculia dictated my career for a long time. I don't have a maths GCSE, and that really narrowed down the things that I was able to do in college and university. Now, I understand that some jobs absolutely rely on numbers, and if you're going to be a scientist or a surgeon or whatever, yeah, okay, fair enough, you need a maths GCSE. But without it, even for kind of like non-number related roles, I have come up against people who have said to me, you don't have a maths GCSE, and then they pause and I go, that's not the only measure of intelligence now, is it? And my friend Jane, you may have known her, Jane McFadden, she has a wonderful video, and it's on the front page of the homepage of National Numeracy, the National Numeracy website, I should say. She spoke to National Numeracy about how failing her maths GCSE impact her work. Now, thankfully, if you know Jane, she's a fantastic content designer now, and she's really improving. She's working on bereavement services and things like that. So just an example of how not having a maths GCSE doesn't mean you're a failure, doesn't mean you can't give back and be good for society. And likewise, my friend Peter Cherry, we know each other from the Dyscalculia network. Peter has a PhD and he speaks Turkish and French. I hope I've got that right. But because he failed his maths GCSE, he actually spent some time on universal credit because he was struggling to find work. And I just think it's just like, please, people, maths GCSE, yes, it's important. I would never discourage anyone from getting a maths GCSE if they want, but it's not the only measure of intelligence or your worth. How can you help people at work who maybe struggle with numbers? Let's have a look. You can start off by reviewing your recruitment processes. And this includes the technology that you use. I've seen so many organizations who will say in their job description, we are an equal opportunities employer. And then you click on the job link and it takes you to a god-awful portal that you can't use with assistive technology. So please, if you're using these kind of like online recruitment portals, please make sure that they're accessible. Most jobs involve using numbers in some way, but please don't include numbers in an interview task for the sake of it. Like, for example, my experience with the London question. Don't use numbers as the only way to measure people's intelligence. Check if a date or time is written in plain English. I was friends with someone who got the date wrong and missed out on an interview and was really gutted. Turns out that it was the time and date was an American, so the date was the opposite way around. It was an American date, which I think is it the month first and the day then the year, and it was an English company. Send reminders of interviews at least the day before. Again, I think a lot of people rely on reminders. I know I certainly do. If you can set that up as an automated thing, or maybe if it's just a person who drops you an email to say, oh, we're looking forward to seeing you tomorrow at your interview, I think that would be awesome. And do some user research on your recruitment documents, like, for example, your job descriptions as well. I think a lot of them just would really benefit from having someone like a neurodivergent person have a look at them, or just anybody really, because sometimes I feel like they don't get shown to anyone for research purposes. Another kind of bane of my life really is pay slips. Pay slips are a real mystery to me. I've never really received a pay slip and fully understood or even marginally understood what was going on. And unfortunately, I'm not the same. Unfortunately, I'm not alone. If I think 28% of people say there's too many acronyms on terms I don't understand on my payslip. People have comments like, for example, I don't know what I'm checking and wouldn't know if it was right or wrong anyway. And I'm thinking to myself, this is the literal money that you get paid. Like, this is it. This is what people pay you. You have a right to understand what information is on there. And I do think sometimes it's made intentionally hard to understand. I'm actually working, I don't know if any of you follow me on LinkedIn. I put a cry for help out recently, which was like, can we make a better template for pay slips? One that's accessible and explains actually what's going on. A lot of people were really kind enough to reply, which was awesome. So I'm working on like an accessible payslip template, which I'll totally share with everybody. I don't want to monetize this at all. And let's kind of, in the hopes that people would see it and then change some of their practices around paying people. Because to me, it's like bonkers. We need to understand this stuff. People who need help with numbers often mask their experience. Now, they might opt out of company and team games or be extra careful about being on time. I want to just talk about the game thing, because you may be unintentionally excluding people from work activities or games if they involve numbers in some way. I'm just working on something in a minute about like non-number related team activities and games. So I can share that with you when I'm done. But it's just a way about considering, you don't know who you're working with. They may be masking. They may not want to tell people that they have maths anxiety. It's not the proudest thing to share. So I think if we can be good colleagues and think about, this is a really good activity, or like funny thing that I'm about to share or do, just consider, does someone have to do some math to do this, or is this going to be inclusive to everybody, I guess. Being late does not make you bad or lazy. Again, we were just talking about this before I started, and the idea that like if you're late, you're bad, I think comes from things like school. I remember my first job was at a retailer, and I had to get the bus. And there was a couple of times where, because I misread time, I was late, and I was on my last warning. And so I would get the bus before the bus I needed to. So it would have to be that I think it was like maybe 25 minutes to half an hour. I would be outside and waiting for the store to open because I was just so ashamed of being late. Now, people who struggle with numbers don't, sometimes they might be like, I don't want to go to this thing, I'm going to be late. But I guarantee that more often than not, they're really paranoid about being late, and sometimes it's unavoidable. So sometimes tell people, do you need 5 minutes? It's okay to be 5 minutes late. That's absolutely fine. It doesn't make you a bad person. And if you work with people and you know they're dyscalculic, or you know they have maths anxiety or low numeracy, just ask them what they need. It's as simple as that. You might be familiar with this poster. The poster on screen is the Home Office designing for users with dyslexia. Research on dyscalculia, however, is 30 years behind dyslexia, yet it's nearly as common. You might also be aware that there is an accompanying poster called Designing for Users with Dyscalculia or Low Numeracy. In 2022, a couple of content designers, myself included, created this new poster. It took us about 7 months to complete, and it's been translated into other languages, which is pretty cool. And it's available on the DWP Accessibility Manual, and it's under the Tools nav. Since I started campaigning, I guess, for accessible numbers, the response has been overwhelmingly positive, and I'm really happy to be a part of that. It's for a long time I felt like it was just me in my own little world, but guaranteed after everything I do, people contact me and say, this sounds like me, I'm going to go get that checked out, or thank you for sharing, like I feel the same. And if you feel the same after this talk today, please get in contact with me. I'm happy to point you in some directions, or just have a chat. That's fine as well. Last year, I saw that there was a gap in design advice about how to present numbers clearly, kind of outside of data visualization. So I have a website. It's called accessiblenumbers.com. It's free and available, and always will be. Now, there's a lot of concepts that I've covered today on there, so please have a look and check that out if you wish. I just want to end on a couple of points. I think I'm quite over. I'm sorry, I didn't realise I'd taken so long. Just bear with me, 2 more slides to go. So data and numbers underpin our basic needs, like, for example, budgeting for food, paying for bills, telling the time. We have a moral duty to explain in simple terms what numbers mean. I think access to numbers, or understand numbers, is a real basic human right. And you can make a difference. People with maths anxiety, low numeracy skills, or dyscalculia are not less intelligent. I think I've said that like 4 or 5 times, but the services that we create let them down. The good news is that you can do something. I hope that you've taken something away today. But there's also another call to action from decision makers and leaders in the room, if there are any. Like, do you really have skin in the game? Are you funding enough research? Are you supporting your designers and content designers to make these changes? Because without you, we can't really do our job effectively. And also just big thank you for coming along and sharing interest, showing interest, and hopefully that you come away with something today that you can take forward to your teams. And thank you very much. That was awesome. Thanks for listening.
That was great. We have at least one question. It's from Marion. Who says,
Marion. Hi, Marion.
Would you say, are you going to speak, Marion? Did I just talk over somebody there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for the talk. It was really nice. My question was, would you say that people with dyscalculia are also affected when they have CAPTCHA?
Oh yeah, so by CAPTCHA, do you mean like select the I got one the other day, select the mountains, or select the
yeah, when you have to enter some verification code and sometimes the letter and the numbers are kind of scratched or very hard to read.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that where they look distorted, like they're kind of like wonky or like wavy, aren't they? Like usually. Yeah. So I think we would all agree that like the CAPTCHA is just inaccessible, full stop. Yeah, I would say definitely. Like I said to you before, a lot of the time looking at numbers is already distorted. So if you're looking at a distorted picture of a number, you're not going to have a great experience. So yes, I would definitely think that people would be affected. And there's also part of this which is like the shame and paranoia that comes with getting things wrong. So entering numbers is something that people find particularly difficult. So if you're having to enter a distorted number several times and you may get locked out, and if you're someone who gets locked out of accounts a lot, like I am, then there's that added pressure of getting something right first time. So yeah, definitely hate them. I would say that there is definitely an issue with the number ones and the sort of like pictures as well. Yeah.
Thanks.
No worries.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
Hi Laura, yeah, I have a question if that's okay.
Yeah, sure, no worries.
So I work for a pension provider and we have some really complicated pages with loads of percentages and horrible PDFs with accessible graphs. Do you know if there's any guidelines or best practices for some more like financial services with really technical percentages? I know you mentioned like healthcare percentages, but yeah, more in that field.
Yeah, let me think. There's a really good course about, I'm not sure if this would be exactly helpful, but there's a great data visualization course by, I don't know if it's ONS, the Office of National Statistics. But yeah, if you've got like large data sets to communicate to somebody, like somebody who's just general public, they focus particularly on that. So I don't know how I'm going to get your information, but I could, it's actually on the Accessible Numbers site. It says there's a link to the training on there. But
that sounds great, yeah.
Yeah, if that's useful. I'm sorry, I can't remember which chapter it's under, but if you just have a look around or do a search, you can find it. I've linked to it on there, so hopefully you'll find that and that would be useful to you.
Oh yeah, no, that sounds fab. Thank you.
No worries. And the Office of National Statistics also has, you might just have to search for this if you search for ONS accessible data. They also have the course content and the guidance format, so you don't have to do the actual course. I think they've just written about it in guidance. I'm sorry, I can't think of the official title, but if you just do some searching of those words, you might find it.
Yeah. Oh, that's more than enough. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries, thanks. Am I still sharing? Yeah.
Yes.
Didn't realise that.
I got really triggered by your your number question in a job interview.
Oh yeah.
I do wacky and crazy at job interviews. They just need to get in the C. It doesn't help anybody.
Yeah. There was like, I remember it was like 5 people as well. Like usually 5 just seemed like a lot. Like I don't know whether that was just me, but I just I had no idea. Sadly, yeah.
That was great. I was
Thank
gonna sorry, I just talked over you. Horrendous is talking over. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that I do sort of usually talk about this stuff on LinkedIn. If you want to kind of give me a follow and share stuff on there as well, and really want to make this as open source as I can do. I think I showed on the slide that there is a book coming soon, and I do training, but other than that, I want to try and make, you know, this is kind of like, I want to get to the banks, I want to get to the, you know, the utility bill providers, and because I think it's okay us in our little bubble trying to do well, but it's the people who are in charge of the pay slips, who are in charge of the bills, you know, these people need to be kind of tuned in as well. So yeah, well, thanks for coming along, everybody.
That's been great. I'm going to stop recording now. So
Sure.
if anybody wants to say anything rude, they can say it after I've stopped recording.